Everyone has mental health. We all feel happy, we all feel sad, we've all felt nervous about something, anxious about a test. We're college students, and a lot of times our emotions are all around us. It's our first time that we really feel independent, we can make our own choices, and a lot of times that's overwhelming. But that's totally normal. I think when we look at it like that, it's a conversation that everyone can have. And I think that's the start to advocacy, is realizing that everyone has had some sort of mental health. I think the lack of knowledge, I think, is something that's sad to me, because it's something that I'm a business major, and like, what the heck am I doing in the mental health world, in the psychology world? And it's because I realize the importance of that in everyday life. And I guess that's a frustration to me, but that's not fair to the people, because mental health is extremely complicated, mental illness is extremely complicated, and it's not something that you just learn about overnight. So that's a frustration. I think the other big frustration is lack of resources put towards it. I'm probably going to hear this one a lot in society, in schools, just in high schools especially. There's not enough resources put towards mental health. Also, no one really talks about your mental health. I think from my own perspective, it took until it was my junior year of high school when we really started talking about mental health openly, and that was in an all-girls setting. So I can only imagine what it's like in a public school with guys and girls trying to talk about a subject that a lot of times is different for men and women.
I think that a lot of mental health stigma comes from people kind of hearing about it and then coming to their own preconceived notions, just kind of from a perspective of they know. I really think that, I guess more of the question, if I could change one thing, it would be getting people to try to understand people's emotions instead of kind of judging their actions.
So a big thing that not a lot of people really know about me is that I've had my fair share of mental health struggles through the past. And it's not something that I really talked about until probably freshman year to this year. It was something that I was never really comfortable opening up about. And I know one of the big reasons is just kind of the stigma that's out there. It's kind of very hard to open up, especially as in the athletic world, you're supposed to have it all put together. So for me not to, it was kind of hard. But I mean, I've struggled and still struggle sometimes. I've struggled with depression and anxiety. And for me, being willing to reach out to other athletes specifically, and just people in general, and tell them that I've been there, and if you want help through it, I'm there to talk. Because I don't think a lot of people realize how many people struggle with mental health.
It's why we changed the language within the mental health advocacy framework, and counselors and psychologists. We really don't use the term. We try not to use the term mental illness, because I think it is more about mental health, because mental illness kind of put the perspective of there's just some group that has an illness, that there's some group that has a problem that's a small group, versus mental health, which is saying this is something that we all struggle with. And I think that has a large influence in terms of how we see things. Once we can acknowledge all of us can experience issues with anxiety, issues with depression, issues with trauma, issues with substance use, issues with eating, it breaks down some of that stigma. And I think that is the biggest thing that we hope to address, is to address the stigma of saying that when I talk about a person that has a mental health issue, I don't see them as just this flat copy of this is a depressed person. It's no, this is John Smith, who is going to school, wants to be a doctor, and has a family, and also has depression. So it's not just one piece of them, or it is one piece of them. It's not the totality of who they are.
I want to get to a point where we can all feel comfortable reaching out to the people around us about mental health without the fear of their reactions. And I think that's just so important in like just allowing people to suffer less, which is kind of the goal of life, I suppose.
I think I get really frustrated about how mental health got separated from physical health because it's all part of who we are, and we would never tell somebody with a broken leg to walk it off, or somebody with diabetes to just, stop eating sugar. Like, I mean, it's just not that simple. And then there's like a sense of judgment that people put on themselves, that it's some type of weakness to get help, when we would never wait to get help when we have strep throat or any other ailment, but we wait to get help when we notice our mental health is suffering, and that it doesn't make you less than, that we all are on a continuum of wellness, and to just getting help sooner is always better.
You know, when I look at the brain, they will oftentimes refer to as the final frontier of science, and you know, mental health there's biological basis behind it, just like any other illness. And it's just because we don't understand the brain as well as other parts of the body, you know, there still remains a stigma around it, and there really shouldn't be.
Stories destigmatize. And when we can put a face and a story to something that's so hard, like mental illness, it's really destigmatizing. When you can hear from a person on campus that maybe you've seen around, and they are brave enough to tell their story, and you know them from a different avenue, and you're like, wow, that person was really struggling, but now they're doing this. And they're more than just their mental illness. A lot of times in society, we put labels on mental illnesses, and that label becomes that person, but that person is so much more than that mental illness. And I think we do that through stories. And that's why I think this campaign is so important. That's why I think our Mental Health Awareness Week is so important, and having advocacy groups that just focus around people really telling their mental health story, and being in a room that people want to listen.
In order to end it, we have to listen to each other. We can't, it's not like a overnight thing, like I have to practice not saying this word. Like, people have to genuinely sit down and care and listen. Because with a lot of people, there's more than one thing going on. Like, if somebody says like, I have depression, well, then somebody would be like, you have depression, you're sad. That's almost never the case, that they're just sad. One of the biggest causes of depression is anxiety, and one of the biggest causes of anxiety is depression. Just one example. So the only way that people are gonna come to understand other people's emotions or end this stigma or really work to like change people's outlook on life is just sitting, being present, and listening.
I wish if people wouldn't be as scared to talk about it as they are, because once you get people talking, you realize that everyone has been through something. No matter to what degree it is, everyone has had some struggle in their life. And just being open to that idea, and just kind of once you talk about it, it makes it so much easier to keep talking about it. So that like initial fear of being, whether it's being judged or like not seeing yourself as perfect, then if you open up and say, okay, well, this little part of my life is broken, like if that fear was gone, I think the stigma would just be gone completely.
I think any time that, you know, the community at Marquette, and be it MSG or others, show a deep, strong passion in terms of bringing up mental health topics from a different perspective and trying to normalize the process, I think that's extremely powerful. And for that reason, I, am happy to be a part of this process, because it allows a different voice to talk about this and to get it out there, and then potentially for people to hear it. Because I think that is a big thing when it comes to mental health advocacy. The more voices, the more people that we have involved, I think that the stronger it is.
In a personal sense, I think it's gratifying to use something bad that I've experienced to promote kind of a greater good for other people who might go through or are going through or have gone through a similar thing. because honestly I think that everyone has a mental health story, and even if someone doesn't have any experience themselves like feeling it, they probably know someone in their life who does and who has experienced it. And yet kind of society doesn't really allow people to talk about it the same way that we can talk about a lot of other things. And so I think it's really important to like break down those walls.
I'm very proud of the campus, particularly the students on the campus, for making this something that is part of their platform and really, raising the awareness of, because again, there are so many students that struggle with these issues, again, 1 in 3 of us, on the campus. And so knowing that, and just making it mainstream to be able to ask for help or think looking out for each other, which we do so well on the campus. And, the fact that, so many students on this campus are passionate about this really makes me happy.
I also think too that life is not always easy, and I think sometimes social media, it can look like other people, everything's great for them, and it's not always. Like there's, both Mike and I had lived through divorce of our parents when when we were younger, and everybody goes through stuff and challenges, and you can be stronger from having had that experience, but allowing yourself to move through it without being so hard on yourself, and that critical voice sometimes can really get in the way. But just recognizing that's part of common humanity, that suffering is part of common humanity, and to not resist that, but to move through it and lean on others and get help when you are experiencing suffering.
Yeah, so I came up with the idea to do photos where people made statements about their own experiences with mental health or just about mental health awareness in general. And I was really impressed with the statements that people were willing to make about their own experiences with anxiety, depression, PTSD, OCD. It was really amazing how personal people were willing to get about this photo that was going to be all around campus. And I think the biggest thing that I got out of it and the statements that people were making is that mental health isn't always what we think it is. People who are depressed can still laugh 100 times a day, and people who are anxious can still be really good in an emergency, and people who have OCD can still be really messy. And I think there are all these misperceptions about what mental illness is and just about what mental health is, because we all have mental health. Everyone has bad days, everyone has good days, everyone has sad days, and we just don't talk about it enough. And I think the title "You're Not Alone" sort of makes people think about friends and their support system, and it is about that, but to me it's more of just you're not alone in what you're going through and what you're struggling with. We're all on this campus, we're all struggling with different things. And it is your own battle. Everyone has their own battle and they struggle with it differently and deal with it differently, but you're not alone in that. And even when you're alone, even when you feel like you can't talk to your friends or your family about what you're going through, just know that you're not alone in it and that other people are going through it too. And I think that that's a huge part of accepting it, and just kind of understanding that it's just human nature and it's just life. And I think that that is kind of the message that I wanted to get across with this whole project. So
your mental health is important too, and take care of yourself. And that's the big, I'm a huge person of self-love. I'm practicing self-love and practicing affirming yourself, because I think it's something, especially as a young woman, it's something that I think a lot of young women struggle with. And if you can love yourself, it really, really helps in everyday life.
Never lose sight of who you are. Know that it, as hard as it seems in the moment, it will get better. You just have to put your head down and get through it.
You're not alone, and that's a big one.
It's the name of the project, so it works.
It's still being yourself. It's about being connected, with others, and you will find a community and others that will accept you.
I hope that people watching this can see that mental health is a social justice issue. And like when we talk about it, we aren't looking for sympathy. We're just looking for open and honest dialogue as to how to create a world where more people are healthy and happy.
I mean, for me, the biggest message I want to send to everyone who's struggling is that you really matter. You matter to all of us, not only, as, a campus community, but, as a, someone who's a member of, our society, that, you have strengths, you have gifts that you've been given, and we really value you as a person because of those things that you have.
We care, and we are here to help, and we're all made to be in connection. And so when you're not at your best, lean on others to help you get through and to get help, because treatment can make a huge difference, and it will get better. Even if it's hard work to get there, it will get better.